Now, welcome to another weekend ramble, where this time we're going to talk about fan theories and rumors and leaks and the expectations they lead to that sometimes are unfulfilling, I guess you could say.
We're going to relate a lot of this back to Mandalorian Season 3 as well as Andor.
Interesting.
Well, think about it. We had no expectations for Andor. Nobody knew what to expect. It just came out of left field and became exciting.
Yeah, you have a good point. Nobody really expected much out of Andor, and then it turned out to be phenomenal. And
Right.
then we had huge expectations for Season 3 of The Mandalorian, and I'm not saying it turned out bad, but it didn't turn out to be anything like I think we all hoped and wanted and dreamed it would be.
I feel like in some ways Season 3 wanted to be Andor, but couldn't pull it off because it still has to be the everybody show. Filoni made a point of saying in many interviews I covered even, he talked about how this was supposed to be a show that he wanted to be talked about around the water cooler. He wanted us to talk about every episode. He wanted everyone to theorize and speculate and get excited about things. Kind of did this to himself, right? We did all that. As fans, we all went around the water cooler, let's say the digital
The
water
internet,
cooler
yeah,
these
the internet
days.
cooler, yes.
And we did exactly that. We theorized, we got excited, we speculated, we picked things apart, put them back together in ways that were fun, exciting, interesting. And then the problem happened that the show didn't seem to rise to the level the theories came up with. I mean, I read theories in the discussions or had them myself that I feel like were more interesting than the show we got. And that is disappointing. Did we do that to ourselves? Or did we just have higher expectations for Filoni and Favreau? Or, as I have started calling them, Favroni.
It sounds like a treat.
It sounds like rice-a-roni, but it's
Yeah,
Favroni.
I was just going to say, it sounds like the San Francisco treat, and then I realized why I immediately thought that.
Yeah.
I actually think this is kind of a multifaceted problem, because for one, and as someone who likes to throw out theories, for sure, that's kind of how I got my start on YouTube, is I put out a Rey theory that her parents were going to be nobody, and it kind of was right. It was right for a little while. I think part of the problem with when you theorize is it's so easy to just say, well, I think the armorer is going to be a spy, for example, and this will be the result. It's much easier to just say that than it is to write that. Like I can probably come up with a mind-blowing theory or how the story could go, but I'm not actually writing that in a way that it would make sense on screen, right? That it would make sense to people watching. It's what I'm saying is it's easy for us to again stand around the proverbial water cooler and say, well, I think Moff Gideon is going to do this or Din Djarin's going to do that, and it's going to be amazing. But it's easy to say that, much easier to say that than it is to actually write that in a way that makes sense.
Maybe. You could argue that either way. I mean, some theories, like the armorer theory, I went so in-depth in my head that I could make it make perfectly good sense. That I made some of the decisions that she made in past seasons make an even deeper connection into this whole spy thing. And then it just went nowhere. That they wanted to have the spies was more, as I saw other people tell me, that it was a biblical reference that when the Jewish people came back to Israel, they had to infiltrate it and they sent 12 spies. They called them the spies, and here we have the Mandalorians sending in spies to go and scope out Mandalore.
I think the one reason why I didn't think that was going to be the case is because it's not an in-universe reference. If you look at every title so far, they've been kind of in-universe, very on the nose, not very clever, if you will. And I don't mean that as an insult.
Just
but
been
they're
straightforward.
They've been very, guns for hire, the Mandalorian, the Jedi. Every episode has a very just on the nose, in-universe kind of name. And so when you hear the spies, you must think, we think, well, they must
Multiple
be referring
spies.
to multiple people who are spies, right? Mm-hmm. Not something that in our world makes sense, but in theirs doesn't so much.
Right, I understand that there were some other comparisons between the two groups, but that seems so weird for a show that seems to most of the time just like to run along the surface level of things to deep dive that way. I don't know.
No, I agree. To go, like I said, to use kind of a real world reference, not that you can't just call infiltrators spies. It doesn't even have to be a reference to anything as much as you're just using a different word. You could have called it the infiltrators, right?
Just the infiltration.
Yeah, or something like that. And instead they went with the spies, which maybe they thought was a little more clever. I don't know.
But that doesn't solve the overall problem that right now they want us to dig deep and theorize and sit around the water cooler and discuss, but then they pulled a Ryan Johnson on us, subverted our expectations, and just chopped Snoke in half.
Well, yes and no, because there was nothing that. The weird thing is, there was nothing that subverted expectations as much as, unless you were considering the fact that it was just kind of a
my
generic.
personal expectations for the season.
Yeah, well, I mean, I expect that's the thing. Like, we should expect big things out of them, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that anybody who comes up with a theory. I wasn't trying to like completely like discredit myself and or anything like that, or you or anybody else who comes up with good theories. I'm not saying they can't be written that way. I'm just saying it's easier for us to get upset that something didn't turn out to be true when we don't really put the work in. But as you pointed out, like there are things where you could look back and see the armor doing shady things, and you could add it up, and you could recontextualize things and make it work. I'm not saying you can't make it work. And so yeah, it does feel kind of disappointing in a weird sort of way that you get this very straightforward, no frills, no nonsense ending. And I know people will say, well, Filoni learned from Lucas. Well, Filoni did not write this. I don't know why everybody keeps thinking like Filoni has like the ultimate say of the show. This is Favreau's show.
This is, yes.
I don't know that Favreau is like the straight shooter, no frills kind of guy. That's not the impression I necessarily get from him, and yet that's what we got.
It just seemed very basic in a way. Like
Yeah.
it was, yes, what happened was interesting in its own way, and it was visually exciting, and everything resolved
It's fun
and
to
had
watch. It's a fun episode to watch.
but it didn't have that deep dive that they made you think that maybe they were doing when they had that Elia Kane episode, and they're showing this deep infiltration in how the amnesty program works, and they're like, ho ho, haha, like spies and stuff hiding out within the New Republic, and here's your political stuff, and then they just threw that out for the rest of the season, like, yeah, well, that's
Whenever
they were
you
just spying for Gideon. That's the end of the story.
whenever you
there.
mix in political intrigue, it's almost implied you're going to have like backstabbing and subverting of expectations and twists and turns. I mean, that's just kind of how it works.
But to have one episode go that deep and be like really, really interesting, and then not care about that at all the rest of the time, and kind of go back to surface adventures and fun, it makes it really choppy.
Yeah, and there are people who will say, well, that's Star Wars. Star Wars is very straightforward. It's not a lot of twists and turns. But
Well, then they shouldn't have done that episode. They shouldn't have given us all those twists and turns if they weren't going to be something that they were going to pursue and continue with.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I'm kind of torn on this, because don't get me wrong, I like original Star Wars, but it's also not 1977 anymore. What people tend to expect out of a show or a movie is not what they expected out of it 45 years ago. It has changed. It has evolved. People kind of expect you to be a little more creative, and maybe that's a shame. Maybe it sucks that we can't just sit back and enjoy a fun surface level adventure.
Well, when they have so much competition amongst the streaming services to pick what
That's-
show am I going to spend my time watching,
Bingo.
it has to be one that challenges me mentally in a way, too. Or be so fun and exciting that nothing else matters. You have to be the peak in your field to grab people these days, and Star Wars needs to be the peak. Everyone needs to be going, I don't really watch Star Wars, but have you seen Andor? I don't really watch much Star Wars, but do you see this season of The Mandalorian?
No, you are 1,000% right, because one of the greatest defenses I see, or one of the most frequent, I should say, is, well, it's just I enjoyed it. It was pretty good. I thought it was fun. But would you have watched it if it wasn't Star Wars? Is that the only reason you watch something like this? Is Star Wars actually competing with other really quality shows?
Right.
And if it wants to just fully embrace the fun action adventure, then fully embrace that and do it, as you said, better than anybody else.
Yeah, you have to be the best at it.
Yeah, but if you want to actually compete with something that is a little more protein, as we've been saying on this channel, a little more meat on the bones, a little something to chew on mentally, then you have to give us that. You can't just throw in, as you pointed out again, you can't just throw in the Elia Kane Pershing episode and imply there's more afoot here, that there's going to be a bigger, more detailed and intricate story, and then just go the rest of the season without doing anything like that.
They're like, here, Andor fans, here's one episode for you.
Yeah, it's the Andor
and,
episode.
oh, here, you guys like pirates, here's an episode for you. You can't do that. You gotta go all in. And you gotta just stick to your guns and make the best show you can make. Because even if this show never has the intrigue that levels that Andor does, that doesn't mean it's not as good as Andor. It can be as good as Andor as long as the writing is sound,
in a different way.
and the action and the storylines are great. But this season, I feel like it let me down a little bit, and I wonder if part of it's because of the fact that we theoried it hard.
We did, because
We did.
I think
Everybody
we were
did.
led to believe we should theory it hard. As you pointed out, Favreau I want you to discuss it around the water cooler. We're getting bigger in scope
Yeah.
and scale. Things
We
are
listen
going
to the
on.
fans. We listen to what you guys say. And I'm like, okay, so they're listening to us theorize. They're listening to the fans tell you what we're interested in, what we think is exciting. But you just didn't care? I don't know what happened there.
It's
I don't
hard
know.
to incorporate it all, right? Because we
It
each
is,
want
it
something
is.
different out of it. So it's not that I have
You
no
can't
empathy
please
or
everybody,
Yes.
exactly.
It's not that I don't understand. It's just it was kind of generic. It was kind of basic, and I think we
You're so
all
basic.
they can come up with something better than that. Fans oftentimes come up with some really good stories.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't mean to discredit fans and fan theories. I love them. I love fan fiction. Obviously, I do that myself. So I certainly believe fans are capable of writing and coming up with some really phenomenal ideas. And so as the actual writers, they better be at least on par with what those fans are coming up with, right?
Yeah. And I don't like to say it, but if Favreau is having a hard time writing these storylines alone, maybe he needs to bring in some fresh blood from new perspectives that can help evolve his story.
Yeah, I don't know how much he writes just himself and how much he has people helping him and, proofreading, or if you will, they're, enhancing the script. I have no idea, but sometimes I just feel a little, again, basic. Like they could use a little more. I was talking...
You can't use your whole season to test the waters for next season because you're going to lose half the audience by then.
Yeah. I was talking, I think, in our Let's Talk Some Mando video, one of my biggest gripes is the story just never slows down. It never takes a moment to really explore characters. I mean, very rarely. They miss, just golden opportunities to the whole Paz Vizsla thing. He dies and he's brushed off. Take 30
It's
seconds.
a hero moment, and then we never see even his son react.
We wonder why these episodes are 30 minutes long, but then when you realize you have a cat in the background playing with a toy. But no, we wonder why these episodes are 30 minutes long, but the problem is they're not drawing in on the things that they easily could to make these a little longer, a little more in depth, a little more exciting, a little more character building, a little more world building.
Just a little more.
Yeah, they just seem to do the bare minimum at times. And I don't think you can get upset at fans thinking it's going to be more than what it turns out to be. Especially when they have some really good ideas from time to time. Though sometimes, again, like I was saying before, they do come up with some crazy theories that just are completely impractical that if you try to put it to screen would be very difficult.
Also true.
But yeah, I think that's going to be all we got for this time. This was definitely a ramble. I think we're all over the board, but I'm really curious to hear what people say on this one. Do you think fan theories and all these prediction videos and all these leaks and rumors that we hear coming out, do you think that actually ruins it? Is this building us up for something that just is never going to be? Or do you think maybe they're just not living up to what they should be living up to? Or should we just be happy with fun action adventure? Have we kind of been spoiled by some really good writing in recent history when it comes to shows like Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad or whatever it might be? Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.